On this episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups, we are going to be putting the rear subframe in the Black Mosquito. Alright, so just finished assembling the rest of the rear subframe. We just had these bits to put on the ends, and those, we've got the shocks on there as well, yellow to match the DeWalt engine over the back there. What we're going to do now is just grab a jack. We're going to jack it up on the back, and then we're just going to manhandle it at the front. Once it's up high enough, we'll put the bolts in towards the rear seat, and then hopefully be able to line up the rear one. So fingers crossed it goes according to plan. So folks, this is where you really need two people, or at least two jacks, to be able to get it up. And you do have to make sure that you align the shocks as well. So it's worthwhile making sure that you remove both the nuts off the top of the shock prior to fitting it. That way you're not going to get stuck and caught out. So there'll be two nuts. There'll be a washer. You remove that first washer, remove the rubber bush. That'll only go on one way as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then another washer as well. So we'll get those off to the side, move them, and then we can guide it in. And then at the bottom of the shock as well, you'll have two washers, so one on either side of the bush, and then it will go directly up in there. So you just got to make sure that when we jack it up, just grab the shock and just kind of guide it to where it needs to be. It doesn't need to be perfect. If it's off center, it'll be fine. We'll be able to obviously compress it and then realign it. So you can do this with one person, however, it's probably not advised. All right, so I'm going to do mine up and then loosen it off. That way we can just make sure that it's going to be square. So I'm going to loosen this side off. That's on loose. Yeah, cool. And then just twist it out of the way a little bit. Two blokes, one shed. Sweatfest 2024. That was just a bit of burr on the thread, that's why it went in a little bit funny. So once again, just going to loosen that off. The top one's loose. Now it's time to get onto the back ones. You have to make sure that this is lined up in the right spots. Probably because they're also loose, it's going to affect where the position is. So yeah, we'll nip these up now. That should get us back to about where we need to be. Okay, so the subframe, by the look of this, needs to go that way. All right, so Kev's just mentioned we're just going to mount the shocks. Just make sure that cone's lined up completely. Yeah, no, that'll be fine. So let's yeah, let's face that. No, I reckon let's face the nipple inwards. All right, cool. All right, so first thing is the stepped washer. That's the locator. That'll locate it in there, followed by the bush. The bush is a little dick, faces downwards. That locates in the bottom. We then got the thicker washer that goes at the top, and then we've got the first nut. So we'll just tighten that one by hand. So we're going to tighten that one up, and then we've got a second nut, which is this one here, and that's the lock nut. So that's now tight, Kev. You can leave that. Also, it is worthwhile noting at the top of the shock, it does have two little cutouts, so you can put a spanner or a set of pliers on there to actually tighten the nuts properly. So because this has a bit of filler in the hole, we're just going to drill it from the bottom just to clean it up, hopefully. There we go. And I'm gonna have to drill a hole for the second one because I don't believe there's a hole that's drilled. Yep, Oh, sorry. There are 2 different length bolts, so we need the shorter one. But that'll be fine for now, I reckon. If we just leave that in there, that'll be fine to line it up. Yep, cool. Can you see where that's come through? At all? Yeah, sweet. You just want to clean that hole up for me, just give it a little buzz from the top. I just can't get any further. It's never a good idea drilling into a freshly painted, rebuilt car, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So what we're going to do now is these rear mounts actually have 2 different length bolts that go in through here. So we're going to put the large one at the back and then the shorter one on the front. So you put that one through if you want first. Yep. This is super awkward to do. We're going to put a washer on the back and then this one here. Kev, you just want to grab a 1/2 inch spanner and hold it from the top. I'll grab the electric DAC, nip it up from the bottom, and then that way the top one, or the front one should I say, should line up. All right, so Kev's just holding that back one. We're just going to tighten this up. Yeah, cool. Okay, that's on there. You just want to hold it. You got it? Okay, cool. All right, so nylon nuts are on. Let's tighten up. No, we'll come back to the other ones. We're going to do the other side, then we're going to tighten up the front. All right, so the rear subframe mounts are done. We did have to drill out the holes only because there was filler over the top of them. But because you're not going to see it, it's not really an issue. However, that if there is any exposed metal, we just have to make sure that before we put the tanks in, we touch it up using some texture or a bit of paint. So the last thing we need to do is just tighten both of these bolts on either side for the front part of the rear subframe. There's 2 1/2 inch bolts. That'll pull it straight in. Do the same the other side, then we'll go back and we'll recheck all 8 bolts, make sure that they're all tightened up. Once they're tightened up, we can then move on to the next job. All right, so that is the episode. That is installing the rear subframe on a classic Mini. As you saw, it did require 2 people to do. You can probably do it by yourself if you had enough jack stands, jacks, and probably milk crates to lift it up on. Because this thing is so high off the ground at the moment, it does make it quite difficult, but you know, you can do it. Like I said, if there's any debris inside that you have to cut or drill through and it is exposed, make sure you do touch it up with paint or some sort of liner to ensure it doesn't rust. So we'll probably whip a couple of bolts out now that it's in. We'll probably do one, remove the bolt, put a bit of paint around there, put it back in once it dries, tighten up, and then do the same to the other bolt. That way you can ensure it's not going to rust from the inside out. Probably even put some cavity wax in there as well, even if you wanted. That's probably a good idea. So next episode, we're going to take it off the dolly. That we're probably going to need all the strength in the world, so I'll make sure I have my wheat bix that day. We're going to put the rear wheels on it, and then put the front up on jack stands. Hopefully, before we get out of this garage anyway, we want to try and put the engine in at least just bolt it in and secure it so it's not going to be rattling around. It's just another thing for me to take loose to my new place. So if it's in the car, it is going to be a bit easier. Once that's in, we're then going to move on to the interior. We're going to start putting the steering column in, the steering wheel, and make this thing mobile, and maybe even just try and put some door locks in. That way it's going to actually be able to lock and close the doors properly. So thanks for tuning into this second episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's move on and get cracking on the next one.